Okay, this afternoon I think I want to entitle what I'm going to talk to us about, Dead or Alive. That's my topic for this afternoon, dead or alive. You know, when we go to a funeral or things like that, the best things are usually said about the person who is dead. And you know, that's when you learn things that you probably never heard about the person before. But when these things are said, I've always thought about, you hear all these good things about the person. They tell you how he was a loving person, was kind, was considerate, all these different things. But you know what's sad about it is that at that time, the person can't see or hear. The person will not know your opinion of him or her. The person at this point in time is impervious to anything that we say. Most of the negatives are not spoken at a funeral. Most of the negatives probably will be talked about by people who know the person well, maybe, but even those have no impact on the person either. The person is dead. And of course, when we go to awards ceremonies, or we have birthdays or anniversary celebrations, or when people are courting, we give a lot of accolades, and the person who is receiving this now feels elevated, feels exalted, feels important. And we like to praise people. We like to do that because it makes them feel good. But when we talk negatives about people, as sometimes some of us are apt to do, sometimes we talk negatives about people, and these negative thoughts, these negative words or expressions have varying degrees of impact on people. Sometimes they create conflict, sometimes animosity, sometimes hatred. Sometimes you have an enemy for life because of saying negatives about a person. So a living person is impacted by words and actions and events and circumstances around them, but a dead person, it has no impact on them. There's a stark difference between those who are alive and those who are dead. But I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Ecclesiastes 9 verses 5 and 6 say, "The living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. Neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten." We know that. Also, their love, their hatred, their envy is now perished. Neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that is done under the sun. These are things we know. But you know, I look at people around me and I see people who are seeking after acquisitions, material things. People who, Christians, who make the pursuit of things around them very important. And I've had occasion recently, more than once, I looked at a picture of Steve Jobs. Jobs, I think his name is pronounced. And he was super skinny. You know, he was sick before he died. And this was the picture the person said was 2 days before he died. And I thought of it when I looked at him, a feeble, skinny man. He had a lot of wealth. We all know Steve Jobs had accumulated a lot of wealth, fame, popularity. He gave good motivational talks too, apart from being the CEO of Apple computers. But when I looked at him, he was almost nothing. skin and bones. And I thought to myself, what of all his possessions? What of all that great wealth? What of all the fame? He climbed to the heights. What of it now? This picture was 2 days before he died. So, all that he had accumulated was of no value. They couldn't keep him alive. They couldn't keep him healthy. They couldn't do anything for him. And yet we see these things happen over and over and over again around us. We see people who get bachelor's degrees, then master's degrees, then their PhDs, and they become professor and all kinds of different things. They reach heights and they feel important. I have achieved. We see people get a house and then they want a bigger house and then a bigger house, and they get a car and a bigger car and so on. People are always trying to accumulate material things. It's the nature of humanity. But how much value is there in this? Because, I have been led to recognize that as we go through this life, we really own nothing. We are privileged to use some of the things upon the earth. And maybe it's a car, maybe it's a house, maybe a palace, whatever it is, but it's not ours. We're passing through. We are going to be leaving it behind, and somebody else is going to occupy it again for a while, but we own nothing. Everything perishes when we die. Jesus, in John chapter 12, verses 24 and 25, says, "Truly, truly, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit." The message of this is that in order to increase, death must take place. The corn of wheat dies, and then from that comes forth abundant ears of corn. Jesus went on to say in verse 25, "He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal." What is he saying? What I'm getting from this is that if we try to cling to life, if we try to cling to that which we have, the thing, the transient, temporary thing, if you love that, you're going to lose that eventually. But when you recognize that that has no great value, and you're willing to give it up, to lose it, he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. Luke chapter 9, verse 23, he said to them, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. So the path of the child of God is a path of self-denial, a path that means giving up yourself. And I think we all know this. I think we all know these things. And I'm not telling you anything new. But I want you to think about the practical application of this. I want you to think about the reality of our lives. And do we on a day-to-day basis come in conflict with these messages? Do we come to face with what it means to deny self and take up the cross and follow me? Because the cross is the emblem of death. And it is basically saying that we should take up this cross daily. We should die daily. So if any man will come after me, if any man, and what does Christ offer? He offers life. He offers everlasting life. So if any man wants to follow Christ, if any man wants to receive everlasting life, he'll have to deny himself. Now, denying yourself means separating from what your life is demanding. It is denying what your flesh asks for and taking up the cross, which means dying to self and following him. It's, as I said, these things are easier said than done. And I think we all can identify with that. We all know what it is like when you're hungry, you need some food. There are some people who don't want to hear anything from anybody until they get that food. And that's at the basic level. But there are different levels at which this can be applied, because the desire to satisfy what the flesh demands is in us, and it's not an easy thing to deny it. But when we recognize that our purpose in life is to serve God, our mission, our goal in life is to receive the life of Jesus, and therefore we can have a part of that everlasting life, which is the life of the Father through Jesus. When we make that our mission, then what is it that is too hard to deny? What is it that is too hard to give up? We find that many of the things, the areas in which we fail in life, are a result of this. And the focus on self. We know this verse in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 49. It says, "Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom." Sodom. Pride. The first one there is pride. Fullness of bread and abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters. We all know about Sodom. We know what happened with Sodom. But what led to the condition of Sodom? Pride. Abundance. That's abundance of food, bread. They had a lot. They were wealthy. They had possessions. They became proud of who they were. And then, of course, by that, they became idle. And it is the nature of earthly possessions, of material possessions, to make people idle. Because what? When you have it, or we buy all the conveniences of life. We buy everything to make our lives easier. And I've done that. I think it's a good thing to try to make my life better, more comfortable. But we have to recognize the danger in that. The danger is that you become so taken up with self, so caught up with who you are, with making your life comfortable. It leads to a separation from God, to a going away from the confidence and the faith in God, because your money, your possessions then become your source of sustenance. Because you see, if when I'm sick I have money and I can go to the doctor and the doctor will give me some things and I'm healed, I don't need God, because my money takes care of it. When I'm hungry, I take my money, I go and I buy what I need. My money takes care of it. My possessions take care of it. If when it rains, I have a shelter over my head that I paid for, my money is taking care of me. And after a while, we get to the position where we don't feel we need God anymore. We don't see God as the one providing these things, because it's my degree, it's my great skill. I'm a great mechanic, and because I work hard and fix cars and I get paid for it, I can do what I want. And so God is gradually pushed out of the picture. I become proud. I become satisfied, full of my possessions. And it leads me to the idleness. And it says this is what led to Sodom's condition. In Romans chapter 1, well, let me go there, because Romans chapter 1, verse 18, reading a few verses, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness." Why? Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So God reveals himself to humanity. The things are abundant in nature and around us, that we can know that there is a God. But mankind denies it. Because when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And this now leads them to the condition. So here's where it starts. Here's where Sodom started. Sodom got proud of itself and thought that it was wise. The people of Sodom I'm talking about, and they professed themselves to be wise. They became fools. And so there was a moving away from an acknowledgement and recognition of God. And you know, it's easy for us to look back at these things, at these people in the past who did these wrongs, and say, boy, they were foolish. And it's easy for us to look at people in the world, the atheists and the agnostics, and say they're foolish. But you know, there are people even who call themselves by the name of God, who, because of pride, because of professing themselves to be wise, they are gradually moving away from the faith and confidence in God. Verse 23 here says that these people, when they moved away from God, and I think you know this chapter well too, I'm sure that David and others would have gone through this, but these people who have denied God, who have become proud, who think they are wise, they change the glory of the uncorruptible God into images of birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. And because of that, God gives them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies. And we know eventually it goes on to the inordinate affections, to man with man, to woman with woman, and so on. So this is what led to Sodom's condition. And today we see in the world around us the same thing happening. As atheism grows, as agnosticism grows, homosexuality is also growing. It's a natural thing. And where does it start? It starts with the elevation of self, the refusal to let self die. I'm so wise. I know all things. I know what is good and what is bad. Remember in the Garden of Eden, you know. In the Garden of Eden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is what led to the downfall of humanity. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Man made a decision that he was going to decide what's good and what's evil for himself. We don't need God anymore. We can make our own decisions. We can make up our own minds. And so the self takes control. The self lives. And so God is pushed away. Um, in 1 John 2, verse 16, we're told that all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. All that is in the world, and everything that we pursue in the world, is tied up in these three. The lust of the flesh, what your flesh desires, what your body wants, what it is demanding. And let's remember, that the body will demand things that are not bad in themselves. Jesus said, as it was in the days of Lot or in Noah, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. These are not bad things. Eating and drinking is good. Marrying and giving in marriage, good too. God it was who put man and woman together and said, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. So those are good things. Those are not bad things. But what was happening here, he's talking about, is that they were focusing on serving self. And so lust of the flesh is serving what the flesh demands. Lust of the eyes, it is wanting material things. Your eye sees this and it wants it. It's more pleasant. It is something that you want for yourself. And the pride of life, do you know who I am? Am I not great Nebuchadnezzar? Is not this great Babylon that I have built for the glory of my majesty? The pride of life. And you know if this is still an issue when people say something hurtful to you. You know if these things are issues when you see how you operate. Now I'm not saying, brethren, that we're going to just try to just steel up yourself and not respond, and steel up yourself and resist this. I'm saying that when you belong to God, when you have surrendered to Him, this kind of behavior, the behavior where the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life are not your focus, this is natural. Verse 15 says, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And so the way to know if the love of the Father is in you is to look at your relationship to the world. The two won't work together. The two won't dwell together. If you find that you are still loving the world and the things of the world, then the love of the Father is not in you. That's what John says here. And we ought to examine ourselves. We ought to look at the extent to which the things of the world appeal to us. Proverbs 13 verse 10 says, only by pride cometh contention. Only by pride cometh contention. When was the last time you had contention with anybody? Maybe your wife or husband, even. We have those things because of pride in us. It is natural and it is so hard to kill. But when we have contention, it is usually, well, it is always because of pride. Because I am too proud to admit I am wrong, or if I am right, I am too proud to let the other party have their way anyway. What's the point of proving that I am right? We all like to do that. Even in our religious discussions sometimes, we carry on with long arguments trying to prove that we are right. And sometimes it's pride. Sometimes it's because of pride why we do that. Now think about how a dead or a living person will react to false accusations. If you're dead, false accusations can't touch you. When Jesus was in um, in the judgment hall. Mark 14:58. The witnesses came up against him. There, verse 57. There arose certain and bare false witness against him, saying, We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. I don't think they were telling lies, because in John, but let me not go there yet. In John 2, in verse 19, Jesus said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Jesus did say that. So the witnesses, when they said, We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another without hands. They were taking the truth, but they were using it as a weapon against him. Of course, we know Jesus answered not a word. Jesus could have gotten up and said, Well, that's not what I meant. Because here we see in John 2 here, verse 20, 21, the Jews said, 46 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? But he spake of the temple of his body. So Jesus said that, but he had a specific meaning which they didn't understand. And Jesus could have gotten up and said, Well, you don't understand, this is what I meant, in order to defend himself. But he didn't answer them, because Jesus was dead to the flesh. Now I'm going to go to Galatians 2, verse 19 and 20. Paul says, For I through the law am dead to the law, that I might live unto God. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I am dead to the law, that I might live unto God. I am dead to well, he was talking about the law specifically here, but in verse 20 he says, I am crucified with Christ. Christ has died. How am I crucified with Christ? When I put my life in Christ, when I receive Christ, I am crucified with Christ. But he says, nevertheless I live. Yet it is not me living now. I am not the one alive, but Christ is the one alive in me. And the life which I now live in this flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God. We have to get to the point, brothers and sisters, where almost every thought, every action, every word that comes from us is at the unction of Christ in us, where we recognize who he is, what he's doing, where we can recognize self manifesting itself. We can recognize what self is doing, pushing itself forward and trying to reign. You know, he says again in Romans chapter 6, picking up at verse 4. Well, let me start at verse 3. Know ye not that so many of us, as were baptized into Jesus Christ, were baptized into his death? So that's what baptism is all about. We're baptized into his death. Therefore, we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection. And I said earlier on, this is where our focus ought to be. Our focus ought to be on what we are called to, on what our mission is, on where we are going, and not allow the demands of the flesh to entice us. Verse 6, knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. For he that is dead is freed from sin. And this verse here is so critical, so important. When you are dead, you are freed from sin. So though we were born in sin and shaped in iniquity, if you have died, you are free from that. And a lot of people are still clinging to it. A lot of people still cling to what they were born in. But if you have been born again, you were not born again in sin. You're born into Christ. And Christ is the one who gives us the everlasting life, the life that is above sin, the life that has no sin. So if you have died, you are freed from sin. And if we be dead with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ, being raised from the dead, dieth no more. Death has no more dominion over him. For in that he died unto sin once, but in that he liveth unto God. Likewise reckon ye also yourselves to be dead indeed unto sin, but alive unto God through Jesus Christ our Lord. We are coming to a time on earth when we are going to have to withstand, those of us who are still alive, we're going to have to withstand attacks. We're going to have to withstand condemnation for the things we believe in. We're going to have people, many of them may even be relatives, maybe friends, who are going to come as witnesses against us. And they're going to take us on, even on the word of God, even on things you have said, as they did with Jesus here. And we've got to be dead. We will have to know that though they bring false witness, though they tell lies, though they twist our words, we will have to be able to stand and to recognize that all these things are of no consequence, because we live in Christ. The flesh, yes, the body, they may kill. It may happen. I don't know which of us will have to die. I don't know which of us will be privileged to escape what is coming upon the earth, either by natural death or some other means, or if God sees fit for us to live until he comes and we be translated. I know that's what most of us would probably want to be translated. But before that happens, there is coming a time of great trial upon the earth, and we all know that. We know that the mark of the beast crisis is to come. We know that we are going to be sorely tested for our faith in God. And if we are not truly dead to self, we can't stand. If we are not truly dead, we are going to give in. No matter how much you know what the mark of the beast is, no matter how much you know who the enemy is, when it comes to your life, when it comes to protecting and preserving self, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where we're going to have to make a decision. And that's where it's hardest. A lot of people are going to give in. The Bible says that some will receive the mark in the hand, in the right hand, and some will receive it in the forehead. And we know there'll be some who believe in the thing, and so they receive the mark there. There'll be some who do not believe in it, but they do it for convenience. And I believe there'll be many so-called Christians who will fall into that category, because though they know the truth and though they know this thing is wrong, in order, and I see so many times people who like to compromise. Well, this is not so bad. Well, the Bible didn't say that, and so on. And we compromise the principles of God in order to get along with life. We have decisions to make, and we're not going to be able to make the decisions at that time when the crisis comes. We're going to have to make the decisions before. We're going to have to reach a stage of our relationship with God where our flesh, where the material things around us don't matter. You know, many of us, many people, I grew up hearing about leaving the cities and living in the country. And there are many today who grew up hearing that kind of thing. But so few are willing to step away from the comforts that the body demands, that the flesh demands. We want to be near cities. We want to be where we can get electricity, we can get running water, piped water. We want to be able to go to the supermarket. We want to be able to do business like everybody else. And so the thought of going into the country, especially as we're growing older, I'm getting too old for this. I don't know how I would live in the country. That's how some might reason. I just want to remind us that Abraham was 75 years old when he finally came into the land of promise. He came into the inheritance. And he didn't come into a land that was well developed and civilized. He came into a land where he had to cut down trees and clear brush and build house and in order to inhabit the land. If God takes you to it, he can take you through it. And while living in the country is not what is going to save you, but we have to begin to separate ourselves from the systems of the world, the things that the flesh demands. The flesh wants to hang on to it. Why was Lot so long in Sodom? We're told in Jude that it vexed his righteous soul from day to day living there, but he continued living there. Why? So we have to take ourselves from under the systems of the world so we can learn to depend on God somewhere. I don't know what it's going to take. I'm not going to tell anybody, oh, you need to move to the country, or you need to give up this or give up that. Really, it's a personal, individual relationship with God that will tell you what you need to do. Some people may remain in the cities. God may need you to be a witness there, and it may cost you your life or whatever it is. Some people may leave and go to the country and they still be lost. I'm not advocating and saying that this is what is going to make you be saved. But we're going into a time of crisis now. I'm fully convinced about this. I'm fully convinced that we're going into a time now when we're going to have to face the crisis. And the less dependent we are on the systems of man, the easier it will be for us to extricate ourselves from them. The easier it will be for us to resist the mark of the beast. But if we're so tied in, all our money is in the bank, all our resources are in their systems, and you think, I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell me specifically, but I believe that when Lot and his wife and two daughters were dragged out of Sodom, and they were told not to look back, the Bible says Mrs. Lot looked back. I don't believe it was her eyes that looked back. Sure, they may have, but I don't think God would have punished her for looking. Something was happening, and if you look, you look. But I believe And forgive me, I may be judging. It's not written in the Bible, so this is just my opinion. I believe that when Mrs. Lot left Sodom, and she thought about, now remember, Lot was a wealthy man in Sodom. He sat in the gates. He was an elder in the city. They had possessions. In fact, they went there with possessions. And so they were wealthy. And I believe when she left, they were dragged out. They couldn't pack their suitcases. They couldn't gather their belongings. They left with almost nothing, the clothes upon their backs. And I believe she looked back and thought about it. And she said, we're losing everything. We're losing everything. I'm not going to be able to go to the hairdresser anymore. I can't go to the nail technician anymore. I can't go to the supermarket anymore. How are we going to live? What are we going to survive on? I believe this is what was in her heart. So it's her heart that looked back. And so she became a pillar of salt. I believe there are many today who are clinging to these things, refusing to let go because we are seeing it as our sustenance. We think we need these things to be alive. We need these things to preserve our life. But God said, Jesus says that we need to lose our lives for His sake. We need to give up this love of, I'm not calling it love, this dependence on material things, and recognize where our sustenance is. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 here, we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, it's talking about the body now, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Do we believe that? Do we believe that when we lose this body of flesh, we have a body not made with hands from God? Verse 2, for in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. We are groaning in this body. Yes, I'm getting to the age where I'm beginning to feel little pains. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I feel pains in different parts of my body. Sometimes going through the day I feel pains. This is telling me that this body is running out of service. It's running out of service. So we groan in this, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. If so be that being clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we that are in this tabernacle do groan, being burdened, not that we would be unclothed, but clothed upon, that mortality might be swallowed up of life. He said in 1 Corinthians 15, this mortal must put on immortality. This is what he's talking about. This mortal being that is in a body of flesh, in a mortal body, must put on immortality. That body that God has prepared for us, a tabernacle not made with hands. Now, he that wrought us for the selfsame thing is God, who also hath given unto us the earnest of the Spirit. Therefore, we are always confident, knowing that whilst we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. Brothers and sisters, when you are at home, and this at home means you're comfortable, you're at peace, you're comfortable in this body. As long as you're comfortable in this body, you're absent from the Lord. Now, what is it that we want? Do we want to remain in this body, to hang on to it, to protect it, to preserve it, to feed it, to answer to all its demands? Or are we ready to deny this body that we can be present with the Lord? Are we ready to lose our lives? that we can find it in Jesus. When the crisis comes, will you be dead or alive? Will you be dead to the flesh and to the world and alive to Christ, or will you be dead to Christ and alive to the world? This is something, it's a decision we all will have to make. It's a decision we're making on a day-to-day basis in everything we do, in all our activities. We're making this decision, and we're just preparing ourselves for that final time. And I just want to put it to us, brethren, we have before us two roads, life and death. Choose life. May God make that a reality for us. That's what I want to share today. And I know I have another 10 minutes, so I just want to leave it for any comments or questions that anybody may have.